Welcome to the Lentil Intervention Podcast, talking all things movement, whole food nutrition and environmental wellness with your hosts, Ben and Emma.
Welcome back to our chat with Dr. Luke Wilson. This is part 2, picking up where we left off on the conversation around added salt and sugar and calorie-dense foods. That, what you've just said, going for a period. And Emma, episode 2, and we're already going down this rabbit hole, but I'm going to go down there because it's an interesting conversation. And Luke, I think I kind of know where you stand, but with this as well. But let's talk about this, because even with a lot of the the leaders that we look up to, the Esselsteins, the McDougals, the Gregors, the Barnards, Ornish, etc., right? They've all got some slightly different views what whole food plant-based means in terms of what we should be eating. For instance, the salt and sugar thing, some are absolutely no salt 100%. Some are let it be in there to make food taste better. Some are you need your nuts and seeds because they're a little bit more, certain minerals they might contain more of, like selenium or zinc or something, that a particular nut might have more in abundance, so it's easier to get it from that. Now, we know when someone really does need to make a significant shift in their lifestyle, from a health reason, from a weight reason, basically they're interrelated, we really do need to make that initial effort to really make that big shift, right? And anything that's super calorie dense, you really got to make an effort to reduce that, to shift that weight. But once you achieve a balance, and that's all relative, what that means, what's your thoughts then long term in reintroducing or allowing those foods to some degree?
Yeah, okay. So I think, as Dr. Ornish says, there's the pound of cure or the ounce of prevention. And so I guess that's the gram of prevention and the kilogram if you're converting it to metrics.
Yeah.
But essentially what he means by that is that if you already have advanced heart disease, and you've got to remember, even Dr. Esselstyn's patients, a lot of them had thrashed their arteries and things for a lifetime.
A long time, yeah.
Yeah. And so the damage accumulates over time, that kind of thing. And so I think if you're in that position, if you're in a position where you want to be reversing disease, then you've got to do the best that you can to be avoiding those kinds of things. And usually what I'd say to people, and what I say to people now especially, is, again, do this like 30 days, do this however long you think you can do.
Yeah.
Even if you think you can only do a week or two, being 100%, removing those things from the diet and just doing it that way, then you can see. And then you put those things back in, and so maybe you lose, like Larry did, maybe you lose your 10 kgs in that first month, and then you decide, well, maybe I will start adding some of these things back in, and you find that you only lose 2 kgs the next month, or you don't lose any weight at all, then you know that those things aren't helping you at the moment. So I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah,
and
agreed.
You can't really have a huge amount of those things. When we look at the populations that do really well, at least as far as cardiovascular outcomes, that kind of thing goes, they do have a diet that's pretty low in fat, to be honest, and it tends to be, Dr. Esselstyn and Dr. Ornish are aiming for about 10%, and probably 20% is about the maximum of where it should be at for some of these kinds of outcomes, I think. So you probably aren't eating a whole lot of your tofu and your tempeh and your nuts and seeds and your avocado at that point. So yeah, I don't think they're necessarily. And I guess the other thing too is, I think being aware. This is not about. There's no prize at the end of the day for being as strict as possible. Unless that's really what you want to do. But otherwise, you've got to think of it with all the other things that we do in our lives that might not be 100% the best for us. Some people, lots of people are aware of the risks of smoking. They still decide that they might have one every now and then. Same with alcohol. Arguably it's related with, any amount of it has a risk of increasing your risk of cancer.
Yeah.
So there's different things that we decide to do or not do in our lifetimes that, but it's just about knowing what your risk is and what you're comfortable with. And so if really doing this in a life without avocado or nuts, or even a week without avocado or nuts, is not something that you want to contemplate, then that's fine. But just my job as a doctor is not to tell you to do, is to give you the information and then you to make your own choices from that, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think, something I always tell people is whatever you aim for, you generally achieve just below that, So why not set the bar as high as you can? And then whatever you achieve is pretty damn good, But if you're going to make bliss balls every single week, and I was actually planning on making some tomorrow. Now I feel bad, but if you make you make a batch and you think, well, it's all whole food, which it is. There's no salt or sugar, which there won't be, but it's all real food. Oh, I'll just polish off the whole thing. Well. Yeah. Then you're asking for trouble.
That's exactly it. It depends on the person. Like, I could be perfectly fine having a bag of walnuts in my cupboard, whereas some people I know, that would be gone in half an hour.
Yeah.
So,
but Luke, it's like you say, it's the awareness, and I think that's the most powerful thing, because let's say younger people, because we're always focused on the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, but younger people that have skin conditions, let's say lots of pimples and things like that, and that's and when you make them aware and say, well, actually you can control some of that with some of the foods that you eat, that if it's and if they trial that, and I've seen this, they trial it and think, my skin's a lot clearer, and then as soon as they go and have half a slab of chocolate and they wake up the next morning and there's this massive pimple on their forehead, it's like, but there's the link. And it gives them that conviction, that, okay, now I get it. If I'm going to go and let my guard down and go out and have some of those fake meat, burgers and so on, and a whole thing of fries, I know that the next day I'm going to feel sluggish. I know my skin conditions aren't going to be great. I know my energy level may not be great, etc., etc. So you understand the repercussions, but then you can also control it better. And that's perhaps where that whole concept of moderation comes in, where you avoid it, but okay, it's someone's birthday or there's a celebration or we're going out. Okay, eat what you want to that degree in terms of it's okay because it's one-off, but also be aware,
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is moderation when it's coming from the standard New Zealand diet or the standard Australian diet is a very dangerous thing. Moderation when it's coming from a strict whole foods plant-based diet is something entirely different, and we just don't know what people were able to, if you like, get away with and what they aren't. And so my job is just to let people know. And if I go out with my family or something like that, sometimes then I'll ask for there to be less oil in the meal perhaps, or sometimes I won't, and then you just sort of take what you're given, I suppose. And but at least I know that I'm taking a bit of a risk doing that. I'm not feeling like the olive oil is good for me or heart healthy or anything like that, for example.
But you're also not eating out every single night. So to eat out once in a blue moon,
not at the moment.
Exactly. Right. So but that's the whole point. It's you can control it better, and the beauty of it as well is if your eating at home is really good, then when you do eat out, you're going to feel a bit. Okay, that was a bit oily. You can taste it, even though there was probably just a drop in there. You'll taste that difference because, like you say, taste buds. Anything salty, sweet, or fat. We're designed to want more, which is a dangerous thing. So Look, I think it's an important thing. It's not don't have it or have it. It's understand. And something that always occurs, I always think about this is when people say, well, we can eat a little bit of meat, it's not that bad. Or, if you look at historically many centuries ago, where meat was more as a condiment to the plate rather than the sort of the hero dish. Hero of the dish. But again, that's a dangerous thing because how do you tell someone, okay, you know what, you can have meat once a week and you'll be fine and your health will actually be good, because that once a week will become twice, will become 3 times a week, and it'll become 3 times a day. So you do need to aim for the best you can to achieve the best result that you've given yourself a chance for.
Yeah, that's what Dr. McDougall says really, is he says, just like you were saying, Emma, before, some people they can have the bag of walnuts. Some people are going to eat the whole thing, and so Dr. McDougall doesn't know when someone turns up whether there's someone that can have a piece, some meat once a month, or whether they're a person that once they have that, they're going to be straight back onto what they were doing before. So.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't know that, because I don't know that either with people, I've got to tell them what the evidence is showing, and that's showing that whole food plant-based diet's the place to go.
Yeah, and just to clarify before we move on from the broad study, you did allow chia seeds or flax seeds, didn't you?
Yeah. So for their omega-3, I think. To be honest with you, I can't actually remember whether we were very strict on them supplementing with omega-3. This was back in the day before that really became, or probably just about the time that omega-3 was becoming a big thing. And so I don't think we necessarily... And the other thing too is Jeff actually does a really good talk where he shows that if you're eating a whole food plant-based, diet, then you're essentially getting...
fat's pretty low.
Yeah, but you're actually getting omega-3 in the fruits and in the fruits and vegetables and the leafy greens and that kind of thing anyway. Even though you don't have huge amounts, there's small amounts in there, and so you convert that ALA hopefully into So even without supplementing, and that's what most people say. I think most of them say, look, if you're worried about it, then have some chia and some flax or some walnuts and just have like a small amount of that each day, but you actually probably don't need that. So I can't remember. I'm pretty sure that we just kept things simple and we didn't really recommend, them supplementing with that. So they supplement with B12, of course. But as far as the omega-3, I think
that's a good question, because I honestly thought that you needed to have your flaxseed powder or your pre-soaked chia seeds. But generally, I'm a fan of flaxseed powder to get that, to ensure that you're getting your adequate amount of omega-3. But I didn't realise that you could actually get it at an adequate level from a well-balanced, sort of broad spectrum diet. That's interesting.
Emma would be the person to ask about that, but Jeff definitely did like a talk where he was showing that, and because the amounts that are recommended are so small, so the minimum intake is so tiny, you can actually get that without supplementing. And I forget which Jeff does that one in, but it's certainly in something that a lecture that I saw several times from him. So it's kind of insurance that we're doing this, adding the chia and all that kind of stuff in, and then. But if you're going to do that as insurance, then, again, arguments have been made that maybe you should be taking the DHA as insurance as well. And certainly some populations, I do recommend that. And nowadays, just, pregnancy, that kind of thing, you probably want to be thinking about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, in pregnancy, you're laying down a lot of new neurons, aren't you? Whereas adults, we already have that firmly established. Was there anything else you kind of wanted to touch on as far as the broad study goes? I know we're keeping you probably a little bit longer than you were expecting.
No, this is fine. It's my fault. I guess we should talk about the results. What did you guys talk about?
So you had significant improvements across the board, didn't you, really?
Yeah, we did. So I'll just go through those. So basically the weight loss at 6 months was 12.1 kilograms on average, and that was maintained more or less at 11.5 kgs at 12 months. So that was the weight loss stats, and those were, to the best of our knowledge, the greatest weight loss at 6 and 12 months at any other trial that doesn't limit energy intake or mandate regular exercise. As we talked about, we didn't ask them to exercise. We also got, basically, it was just, none of it was surprising to me because it was the same stuff that I'd seen happen time and time again at True North and with Dr. McDougall. So we got reductions in cholesterol. They didn't end up being significant. The problem, of course, was we were busy taking people, their GPs, we had to teach them how to take people off medications. And so the intervention group had about a third reduction in their medications by the end of the trial, versus the control group who had an increase of almost 10%, so about 8% there. And so that was probably our fault too, because we were making them get their blood tests more often than they would normally. The GPs were probably looking at that and saying, oh my gosh, they've still got a high cholesterol, so we'd better do something about it. And the only thing they knew to do, of course, was put them on medications. But because of the way that we decided to look at things and interpret the data, and because we had quite a, when you think about the numbers in a study, I always think back and I think about the participants and what a great group of people they were. And I haven't really given them enough of a shout out during this, which I usually do, because I honestly think a lot of the reason that we got the awesome results that we did was because they were so committed and so excited by it all and so engaged. And so they were the people who actually did the work.
Because that would have been the biggest risk, is that they faded and didn't follow through. So massive kudos to them for sure, for sticking it out and having trust in the process.
And obviously to you for designing such an effective study. So don't sell yourself there.
But it was still the participants who did the mahi in the end. So so good on them. And so basically, because we had such a diverse group of everyone, it's quite tricky then to show, because some people didn't start with high cholesterol and some people didn't start with high blood pressure. And so we know that when you have people that are, have high cholesterol, for example, if we'd actually just said, well, our criteria for this is people need to have, say, a high-ish cholesterol, which would be like over 7 or something like that, for example, then we would have very easily found that they had a reduction in that was significant. But because we were starting with some people that, and I see people, reasonably often that don't seem particularly healthy to me, but they still have a cholesterol that's, maybe 4 or 5 or something. And so theirs won't have as much room to shift. So that's one of the reasons. The other reason, of course, is we were taking them off, or their GPs were taking them off medications, obviously left, right, and centre as well. So that means, of course, when you come off a cholesterol medication that's lowering your cholesterol, then your cholesterol goes up. And the reason for that is because you've come off the medication, even though you might be healthier. Same with the blood pressure.
And allowing salt to still be consumed, even though it was an orange traffic light. Did you ever have a concern that could sway the result as well a little bit? Because, who knows how many twists of the salt grinder they're putting in. Was that ever a little bit of a concern or not really?
I mean, we talked to them about these things, and basically, I think what we really wanted to do was get that adherence and try and make it something that they actually could do. Because when you talk about salt, one of the issues with salt, it's like basically we just talked before about going to a restaurant. It's pretty much impossible to get a meal without oil. Just the same thing, it's pretty much impossible to go to the supermarket and get a food that doesn't have salt in it. And so
and cheese being a big one that people don't actually realise.
Yeah, totally. But every processed food, or, when we talk about processed foods, I mean, there's a lot of stuff at the supermarket that just makes your life a little bit easier. And so you're not cooking everything from scratch. And I honestly think a large part of the reason that people don't eat well, as far as what we consider to be eating well, is not because they don't have the information. It's because it takes the time, and
it's
so
lifestyle.
It's not as convenient.
People are not having enough time dedicated to get in the kitchen actually cooking a dish.
Totally.
So
totally.
So the McDougall approach is you don't cook with salt; you just have salt on the table, and you can add to your taste. Is that pretty much the same approach you took? So you could actually control more. You weren't sort of taking the double approach of cooking with it and still adding on top out of habit.
I think I don't remember whether we spoke to them specifically about how they should be using. I think we might have because we'd learned that from Dr. McDougall as well. But essentially, we weren't encouraging salt. Most of them probably weren't having a lot of it. But we just sort of said to them, if you go to the supermarket and you find something that that you're going to buy, a sauce or something like that, that's going to make your meal tasty, then it's got salt in it. And so let's obviously try to get low salt versions when we can, but otherwise you pretty much eliminate them being able to do anything except cook everything from scratch.
Exactly. And if you're taking a whole bunch of people used to hyper palatable food and then saying, here, eat this steamed broccoli without anything on it, good luck sticking to that for a long time.
Exactly.
Got to be a little bit of an adjustment period.
Totally.
Yeah. It's a transition. That's why it's called a transition to a different lifestyle, not a tomorrow you wake up and here's a whole new plan. It's too traumatic. It's too traumatic.
Yeah.
And I presume a lot of these individuals would then go home to a family who would also have to adjust their way of eating to support that person or not. So it's 100%. Hugely challenging, for sure.
Yeah. So we needed them to be able to have a little bit of fun with it, to be honest. That's what we were trying to do. We were trying to make something that would actually work in Gisborne.
Fantastic.
Something that works at True North or works at the McDougall program where they've got you locked in. But even the McDougall program, that was always like a running joke they would have between McDougall and True North. And I'm sure Dr. McDougall will be okay with me saying this, but essentially, they would always, McDougall's food was always so salty compared to True North because True North had like 0 salt added. Yes. So you go to McDougall's and the food was really good, but
you can taste it. You can taste the difference.
Yeah, I'm funnily enough, I'm super sensitive to salt, and so I get this taste. If I've had too much of it, I get this taste that sort of just lingers in the back of my mouth for a day or two, to kind of remind me not to have salt again. It's just really salty and kind of yuck. Yeah. And I go to McDougall's, and the other thing too, you've got for obvious reasons, you've got like a bathroom scales in every room in True North, and you would notice the amount of weight that you would lose a couple of days after coming back from McDougall just from the fluid shift. So that was kind of funny. Yeah. So there would be like a kg or 2 that you'd put on just simply from the salt. And it's not like it was high salt food. It just had some salt in it. So you would have some
It's the difference it makes, for sure.
Yeah. You'd have some bread or something there that you would get in 1,000 years at True North.
Oh, this is brilliant. No, Luke, that's, it's certainly, because I know you talk a lot about the broad study, a lot of opportunities you get to present, which we're going to talk about that conference that you were at recently. But the insight you've given to the background is certainly opened my eyes, because it just gives a bit more context to I guess the bigger picture, the reality, and again, like I said, this study is homegrown. It's New Zealand. Australians can relate just as much as we eat a lot of the same food, same culture, very similar culture, and it's so close to home. And if you can get this kind of result with our way of eating, as in our Australian New Zealand way of eating, then come on, what are people waiting for? So it's really nice to get that real insight, that real background into that whole journey of how the broad study began and where it is today, and the fact you're still in touch with some of these amazing people is awesome. Well done.
Thank you.
Yeah. So you were recently in Fiji.
Yeah.
How recent's recent? Well, definitely not the last couple of weeks, but a little earlier this year.
Yeah, it was all perfect timing, really. So my birthday, I turned 40 on the 9th of March, and so
you're 40.
Yeah,
gosh,
I know.
Plants, they keep you looking young, eh?
Yeah.
But anyways, so I was at the ASLM conference that we were at last year, Emma, and there was a guy there from the South Pacific Society of Lifestyle Medicine, and I got to talking to him, and I said to him, do you guys have a conference coming up or anything like that? Because I wouldn't mind going to Fiji. And we do, and it's going to be on the I think it started on the 10th of March, and I said, well, that's a pretty happy coincidence, really. And so I said, well, would you like me to speak there? And he was interested in having me speak there. So that was what I ended up doing, booking that in sort of a year in advance, kind of to be able to spend some time there for my birthday. Even though I obviously grew up in New Zealand, I'd never been to the Pacific before, so it was.
Right, okay. Yeah. What a way to bring in your 40th year. That's fantastic.
Yeah, and so I was there, and the conference ran from the 10th to the 13th. The 10th. Yeah, I think 10th to the 12th or something. I came back on the 13th, which was, I think, literally just before the weekend when the self-isolation had to start happening. So I think the Sunday, the 15th or thereabouts, was when that happened. So it was all kind of perfect timing. Because at the point that I left, like there were no cases in Fiji, and they did the little, they were doing our temperatures and things when we got to Fiji, and obviously passed that test and things, and so it was all very nicely timed for me. I was really lucky.
So who attended that? Was that more of a regional? Well, as the name suggests, South Pacific. So was there good representation? Is there a a yearning for a lot of the communities to look at changing or reverting back to their lifestyles?
Yeah, so there were a lot of attend. It was a decent turnout. It was about 100 people from throughout the Pacific. And
Great.
so, Papua New Guinea, Solomon Islands, Vanuatu, Tonga, Samoa, Tuvalu, Kiribati, Cook Islands, and then Fiji. And we even had the Fijian, the president of Fiji open the conference for us.
Wow, Bunny Rama, or
nah, that's the
he's the
the prime minister.
Minister.
So this is I think he goes by George, but it's Georgie or something. Conrad. I don't know. Probably butchered that name. I didn't really get a good opportunity to learn any Fijian there, but I picked up a dictionary on the way back, and so I'm planning on next time I go back making more of an effort.
Yeah. And he's apparently vegetarian. I read on your blog. So
Yoji Konrote. This is the president's name. Yeah.
There we go. Thank you. That's
great. So was there a push for plant-based at the conference?
Yeah, it was very much. So a lot of it was I guess in association with sort of the people that run the CHIP program over there.
Great.
And so it had a very, very strong plant-based focus, and all of the meals were plant-based, and pretty much the speakers were pushing that, which was great. So there wasn't any controversy there, and we enjoyed, taking the lectures that were having a go at the keto diet, and that was actually the first question I got asked, which I had to come up with a very judicious answer, because I was asked what was DFN's opinion on the keto diet, and I, as a representative of Doctors for Nutrition, I wasn't really comfortable just busting out with my own opinion and saying that represented the organisations, but I still, came up with something, and he said it was a very safe answer, and then moved on to the next question. So.
Good job.
Now, is there a big interest in a plant-based lifestyle? I guess it could be twofold. Is that because of the health of a lot of the communities? Is it environmental reasons as well that a lot of the South Pacific nations are struggling with at the moment?
Yeah, and when I was over there were pictures in the newspaper of people's. It was a little boy standing outside his house, and the water level had come up and things, and it was him looking very sad because, obviously this was affecting their livelihood, and that's the sad thing about Fiji. So even on the way back, the guy who took me the transfer from Pacific Harbour back to Nadi, where I was flying out from, a lot of their economy is based on tourism, and this guy had I was the one job that he had all week, and he was from a little village, and you look around and I never really thought of this, and a lot of the time that you spend in the Pacific is in these resorts and stuff, but just looking already they don't, even our houses and things here compared to what they have, is luxurious. Even like the most sort of basic place in New Zealand would be considered that. And so it's not a population that has huge amounts of money and things. And you can see that, with climate change, it's going to affect these people first. And you even saw what happened with this COVID thing is they were busy locking down for that. And then
and they've just been slammed by a storm now.
Yeah. Just comes through, and it's like, well, that's just so rough. And this is what's going to happen. And essentially, it's all of us in our countries affecting their weather patterns and affecting the water levels and stuff. And they've got very little to do with it, and their carbon footprint will be virtually zero.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
So, I made a real point of emphasizing that in my talk, and because I said, well, this is the reason that we chose a whole food plant-based intervention, and, you know, gave the evidence for it. But I was like, well, there's no use in us using something nowadays. And this is one of my major objections to, you know, the high-fat diets or the keto diets or the ones that emphasize the animal proteins. It's just maybe sort of 200 years ago that would have been fine. But nowadays, we've got to think about the environmental impact of our choices as well. And so if you can be, you know, even healthier, or, you know, way healthier, with a whole food plant-based way of eating, then that's a no-brainer in my mind. And it's almost unethical for people to be pushing these other ways of getting to the same.
100% agree. Absolutely.
Because a lot of these islands, I've travelled a lot of. I've travelled the whole mainland of Fiji, and I've been lucky to have travelled a lot of these other islands, and you know, a lot of these places they can't have you know, sort of cattle, sheep, or anything like that. I mean, fishing has always been one big component, but I know the likes of Fiji, you know, a lot of the land was historically cleared for sugarcane plantations. And now a lot of those countries it's all about forestry and mining for the Western world, you know, so they need land as well. They need the opportunity to turn it around and be self-sustaining.
And they do have really high rates of, you know, type 2 diabetes, for example, and some of these lifestyle diseases. So there is really the need. And the other thing too, and one of the coolest parts of the conference was there was a doctor there from a TV program that they'd started up called Pacific Island Food Revolution, which apparently is on New Zealand. I haven't watched it yet. That's maybe some of the thing I should do during this lockdown. But TV and movies, as we know, are really, really good ways of communicating to the general population, probably more effective. And this is what the doctor who was talking about this was saying. He was saying, well, really, in order to compete with the likes of Coca-Cola, who of course have just so much money, they can just splash billboards everywhere showing, you know, one of their 7 stars drinking Coke and everything. One of the ways to combat them is to actually be, I suppose, engaging, and rather than sort of doing boring public health messages, is actually creating TV and programs and things that people can watch. And so that was sort of the idea behind Pacific Island Food Revolution. Is it's, you know, I'm sure it's not plant-based, but the idea is to instill some pride in these traditional foods. And he gave this, you know, really sad story, really, of you know, being a doctor, of course, comes with, just like it does in New Zealand and Australia as well. So here, and I think even Fiji, you call it mana. So it comes with some respect. And so when he'd go out to the villages and things, they would actually be feeling bad and apologizing to him because they were just serving him just, you know, their traditional foods. And they didn't have all the, I suppose, what they've come to view as being the right kinds of foods to eat, or, you know, the decadent foods of the West is what's, and probably a large part of the reason that they've come up with that idea is because that is what they see on TV from us as well. Yeah. So that was one of the ideas behind it, is to sort of reinstill some pride in the traditional foods, and that will go a long way towards, I think, improving the health.
It's a great starting point. I'm on their website now, and we'll put a link to it in our show notes. But it's aired everywhere: Samoa, Tonga, Papua New Guinea, in Australia on channel.
Oh, great!
Yeah, on the 7 Food Network and TVNZ for New Zealand. So it's not plant based, but, you know, a lot of traditional way of eating and cooking will be predominantly plant-based with potential fish or whatever. I think it looks fascinating.
Like they were saying, like, you know, some of the villages there, the taro leaves are, you know, basically like one of their green leafy vegetables over there, but they, you know, when they sort of said that to them, they were like, oh yeah, that's what our grandmother used to eat. And so they didn't, you know, they were just back in the habit of sort of throwing that kind of stuff out. And now, you know, more looking into, being able to use that stuff again, and I suppose get some of those that knowledge around the traditional cooking methods from the older generations and stuff too, which is building community as well, which is a really great thing.
It's going back to their roots. Excuse the Luke, you mentioned you're a part of Doctors for Nutrition, just like Emma is. Tell us a little bit about, just very briefly, Doctors for Nutrition, what they're about and what your role is with them.
So, Doctors for Nutrition. So, basically, the idea of Doctors for Nutrition is to have an organisation, a charitable organisation that advocates for whole food plant-based within New Zealand and Australia. So, the idea is to, basically, especially to increase the knowledge of this by health professionals and to engage with the general public as well. And of course, we had that conference about a year or so ago, which was sort of our first event, and that had a really good attendance as well.
Yeah, kicked off with a bang, that's for sure.
Yeah. And so that's really the idea behind it, is to be an advocacy group, and you've obviously got different organisations and in the States, you've got the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine with Dr. Neil Barnard heading that, of course. And then there's also been some established recently in the UK. I think it's Plant-Based Health Professionals UK or something like that, with Shireen, who's one of our international ambassadors for Doctors for Nutrition, and Neil Barnard as well being one of our international ambassadors or advisors for Doctors for Nutrition. And then with Dr. Scott Stoll as well, who was over with Dr. Neil Barnard with the Plantrition Project. So it's like an organisation like those, but specifically focused on Australasia or New Zealand and Australia. And, I'd be quite keen for it to be involved in the Pacific too, but I guess we'll have to ask them first. So that's basically Doctors for Nutrition in a nutshell, I suppose. And it's really exciting because it just gives us a platform to reach out to these other institutions and other healthcare professionals, and it links us, with a whole bunch. I don't even know how many people we're up to on our advisory council now. Emma, have you been keeping track? We've got a new guy for New South Wales.
Dr. Gavin Levy has come on board.
Yeah, and he's planning on being an orthopedic surgeon, I saw on his profile, which is pretty cool. And then we've got, we've just introduced a new dietitian from New Zealand, Fuchsia. I forget what her last name is, but she's not even on the website yet. So we've got lots and lots of health professionals. And so those would be good people if anyone's listening and they're wondering, especially in Australia, who they might be able to talk to about things or reach out to. Then you've got basically representatives for just about every state as far as a doctor and a dietitian. And so, so
that's great. It's a singular voice representing the medical profession, and sort of pushing forward with, well, we'll be biased with the way we should be living, and so I think it's a fantastic organisation, and it's only growing. I mean, they've only just recently got a new CEO on board as well, I think. So
Marion, she's great.
So definitely big things to come, which is very exciting.
Yeah, well, we're working on some pretty cool stuff at the moment, so I'm not sure whether I'm allowed to. I won't talk about it too much because you might even want to get some of the others on to talk about it when it comes out. But we're working on a guide that's, and if you've got a few people listening, we're basically
we do. We're growing.
Good, good. So we've got a practitioner guide that we're coming up with, and we've all been doing quite a bit of work on it, but Hannah O'Malley from the Better Base in New Zealand, she's that you talked about earlier.
Yes.
And so she's been doing a lot of hard work on that, and we're getting it all designed up and everything. And so the idea of this is that we'll be able to provide this to practices so that or or just health professionals. So even, some pharmacists and potentially even physios, people like that. But especially, emphasizing sort of GP practices and just to give the GP the information about plant-based. But more importantly than that, and that is the thing that I'm really excited about, we're trying to give them some tools to be able to use to actually help them and the patients to realise the importance of nutrition. So
brilliant.
All will be revealed, but we're getting that sort of ready to go. And so if people have got practices that they think might be interested, we are trying to sort of pilot that first to kind of see how it goes. And so if they've got a GP or someone that's plant-based friendly or might be interested, then those would be the ones that we'll be going to first before we try to roll it out to everyone. And we'll kind of see how that goes. And there's a lot of ideas around how it might all develop. And I think that's really exciting. And we just need to find, with everything else that's going on, when would be a good time for us to really be pushing that out. But
that's always
at
a
the
good
same
time.
And I think realistically, with everything that's going on at the moment, people will be looking for ways that they can become more healthy and be a little bit more proactive about their health, perhaps. So, and doctors might have a bit of time on their hands as well to be learning about this kind of stuff. So we'll see how it goes.
Oh, look, we certainly look forward to it. And as soon as it is out, we'll definitely have someone on the show, whether it's you again or someone else, but definitely talk us through the whole process and what it's hoping to achieve bigger picture. So
yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, for sure. So lastly, 2 zesty bananas.
Firstly, where did the name come from? Because I just love project. That
name. So that was me and Matt, and
hence the 2.
Well, no, you'd think that.
I thought you're being a bit greedy.
No, actually, you're no. So basically, we wanted to come up with a name that, I guess this is quite a while ago now, and looking back on it, people either love the name or they hate the name, but they remember the name, and so I'm still quite liking it. And the thing I like about it is that I didn't want it to necessarily be anything about health. I wanted it to kind of be a little bit more holistic than that, I suppose. Well, it's all health, I suppose, but health doesn't necessarily not include the environment. If you and it doesn't necessarily, it basically just gave sort of a platform to be using that sounded like a bit of fun and wasn't so, because health can be, especially for the general public, like we're not always that interested specifically in avoiding heart disease or avoiding type 2 diabetes
until it affects you directly.
Yeah. And it doesn't affect you directly until you're quite old usually. And so what I wanted to do was, in my interest and emphasis on where I really like to take the movement in the future, is to a younger audience, and maybe to talk to them. It is more talking about the environmental aspects. Maybe it is, maybe even talking more about the animal aspects. And so from my platform being something that's, not necessarily wedded to health, I want to be able to use that to, I suppose, be able to look at some other aspects of life that I think are important and push those as well. So I guess that's where it sort of came from. We're just looking for something that was a little bit fun, a little bit silly, and Matt's favourite fruit was bananas, and then I think it was his, so it was his partner who suggested, because there were 2 of us, that she thought it should be 2 because then we liked the zesty bananas or something, which I guess is kind of stuck. And so I definitely. I want to do more with that, but it's obviously gone a little bit, and I wouldn't say by the wayside, but it's been sort of shelved a little bit recently. But
you've been very busy with other things, haven't you? So.
Celebrating birthdays and
relaxing on Fiji beaches.
But I
worked on the charities,
but I love the concept behind it, because just like our podcast is, when we first sort of spoke about creating something, is is, do we just talk about nutrition, or do we just talk about this or that? But they're all interrelated. Environmental wellness, as we put it. It's general health wellness. I mean, you don't want to use the word health, but it is, because the environment is still related to our own health, and
exactly.
And then the ethical aspect, of course. I mean, that's it's the way we behave, the way we live. I think it's great what you're trying to do. Just like so many other people, sometimes people get very focused down one aspect, but it's a bigger picture, and when you talk about lifestyle, which is what your main drive is about, it's bigger picture, and you can't look at things in isolation. So,
exactly. It's about fun, and Dr. Ornish talks about it, and he talks about the joy of living being more powerful than, the fear of something bad happening to you. And you even see this with the response to the Game Changers, and I think that was a real sort of masterstroke by the people who put that together. And friends James and Susie, give them a shout out for it, of course, because it was pretty awesome. But it's very well thought out. I think it's much more clever than you would think on the surface of it. And even though Jim and Susie's real passion, and they would be great guests to get on here if you can at some point.
We would love
that.
They're on our list.
Try.
Look us up, Luke.
To get an introduction or anything. But really, their passion is around the environmental aspect, right?
That's right. Yeah.
But they didn't decide to make a documentary or to fund to produce a documentary that was about the environment. And it does talk about it.
Yeah.
But they knew that what people really cared about, and men especially, was their sporting prowess and how they were going to look, the sort of
the whole meat culture, the protein culture.
But also
the muscle strength,
the appearance. I mean, why do so many people go to the gym in New Zealand and Australia? It's not necessarily because they're concerned about their blood pressure or their long-term health. They go because it makes them feel good and it makes them look good. And so that was really what the Game Changers is talking about. And even the bit they have about, and this is something that Susie emphasizes a lot in her book, in her interviews and stuff, and even Jim does too, is about the sexual function sort of aspects of it as well. Like, that's really important to people. And even Dr. Esselstyn talks about how that was, and that kind of thing is probably what keeps people on track to some extent, more than necessarily their cholesterol being lower or their blood pressure being better or something like that.
It's the underlying factors people don't like to talk about, but they're so conscious of it and so aware of it.
Yeah, and I don't think we should be ashamed of the fact that we want to feel good in the now, and to some extent, again, another book that, so again, from those guys, they sent out part of their Christmas package last year was it's called The Power of Now, and it's talking about being sort of more present and being more in the moment, and that's quite a cool sort of mindfulness thing to be doing. And you just, so we need to be feeling like what we're doing immediately is sort of having an impact and making us feel better and a useful thing to be doing. And so always having goals are great, and I always keep heaps set for myself, but I'm trying to be a little bit less future focused, and especially with the situation at the
everything
moment,
that's going on.
It's quite life affirming, because we don't know what's around the corner. Nobody predicted this was going to happen, and
well, some could argue against that. There was a ticking time bomb waiting to happen, but that's another story.
I know what you're saying, but there's so many times, I guess, that there's been warnings about this kind of thing. It's like the boy who cried wolf. We've heard it so many times. Oh, it's going to be this bad and it's going to happen, and then all of a sudden it actually does. And even I was thinking when they were first talking about this, it's just going to burn out, like, even the swine flu, like I was alluding to way back at the start of this, that was something that everyone was really, really concerned about at the time. And it just, we all got in our flat and we were all fine, and life went on, and there was no lockdowns or anything like that.
That's right.
So...
And then more recently, you've had the likes of MERS that didn't even affect us, or hardly, so...
I think it was too effective. It was too deadly, so it didn't really spread very fast. So apparently they can only be sort of one or the other. but I'm not a virologist or an epidemiologist even, so I won't even try.
No.
Yeah.
No, brilliant. Emma, anything else? It's been such
Might need a bit of editing.
What was that? Sorry.
Said it might need a bit of editing.
That's all going
it's
in.
been a really great chat, and I loved the kind of behind the curtain look at how things went at True North and John McDougall's. So that was great because I haven't heard you speak about that in depth before, so I really appreciated that. How can people reach you if they want to come and see you under Two Zesty Bananas? What do people need to do for that?
They can just go to the website, or the email is doctors@twozestybananas.com. That was another reason why we chose the name, because every .com that you look for was gone. But Two Zesty Bananas was not, funnily enough.
Hey,
so
you don't want to be making the same.
.com.
You don't want to be making the same mistake as Harry and Meghan. You know, you come up with a name and then the domain's gone.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one way. And then, of course, if it's sort of more serious stuff that's not clinically, related, and they want to talk to me for Doctors for Nutrition, then that's Luke at doctorsfornutrition.org.
We'll put all those links in the show notes for sure. So
Fantastic.
people don't need to worry about writing it down right now as they listen to this.
Yeah.
But
but do get in touch, because I like hearing from people, especially at the moment. I'm better with my emails than I used to be. Not as good as Dr. McDougall, but there was a joke that that he would reply to them before people would even finish sending them. So I don't know. That was at the time when I was there, and I imagine his email volume must have increased exponentially after that. So I don't know how well he kept up with it, and I'm sure he probably isn't doing as much nowadays. But
probably
that was
paying
always
someone to do it now. So
yeah. One would hope so.
Yeah.
And I know it's a bit hard to talk about plans at the moment, but any big plans for the rest of the year?
Well, all the plans have kind of been a little bit. Yeah, I mean, definitely getting this practitioner guide up and running is really a big emphasis for me at the moment. That's really something I'm very excited about, and I was hoping to probably do a few more talks and things, but maybe the Fiji one will be the one and only for this year. There's definitely potential that could do be involved in some webinars and that kind of thing with Doctors for Nutrition during the year. And there's the ASLM conference is, I think, at this point scheduled for December. Yeah. So hopefully, by the time that comes around, everything will have settled back to more or less normal, and I'll be able to come over for that. And then we were planning, of course, Doctors for Nutrition, we're planning on having a dine with the doc before that. And so that would be something that we'd still be looking at doing. And so that's probably not a bad time frame for thinking about getting back on the talking circuit.
Yep.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
But I think that's one of the things I really miss is like it's great to be able to talk to you guys online, but nothing beats like catching up with people in person.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, again, like I was just saying before, I don't want to get too future focused about things, but that's. But I think at the same time, this is really, so many positives are going to come out of this, and one of them is going to be the community building that it's doing, because we haven't had an opportunity, our generation or even our parents' generation haven't had an opportunity for something like this kind of massive to happen to them. And what it does is it brings people together for a common purpose.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's uniting people and people just friendlier. You see people out. I've been riding my bike a lot this year, which again was really fortunate timing. And you're seeing lots of families out on their bikes, and the roads don't have many cars on them, and it's safe for people. And when you're walking around and things, people are saying hi even if you don't know them, that kind of thing. It's really given in this city that I live in. So I think there's going to be a huge number of positives, and I honestly think this is going to be the beginning of the change that we need to have in order for us to really make the difference that we need to, as far as climate change is concerned and as far as people's health is concerned.
I really hope so. Yeah,
it will be.
Yeah, there's a huge opportunity lying just in front of us. So we just gotta take it and lead.
Yeah,
For
definitely,
sure.
definitely. So thanks for what you guys are doing. I think this is perfectly timed.
and it's all coincidental because we were going to do it, anyway. But it just so happened that here we are during a lockdown, so people have got a little more time on their hands. So it has worked out well for us. So
yeah.
But brilliant. Luke, thank you so much. Bit of a lengthy interview, but hey, that's what it's all about. It's a conversation. Like we said before, we don't script this. We don't have a clock. Maybe we should.
Maybe we should. Yeah.
But no, that's what it's all about. It's just, and we hope our listeners enjoy the journey as well in terms of the conversations we're having. And again, if if they have any questions they want us to follow up on based on this podcast, reach us at the Lentil Intervention on Instagram, on Facebook, or email myself directly. And Luke, again, thank you so much. And
thank you so much.
It's been a real pleasure having you
Absolutely.
as our first guest.
Thank you. Oh, that's an honour. The first guest. I wasn't going to say that at the start because I was like, oh, maybe they're going to do a lot of them at all at once, and then they'll just release them different times. So I might not actually be the first one, but how cool is that?
No, we thought we'd bring in the big guns.
It makes me feel real special. Yeah. No, I'm not even joking. It's a real honour, guys, and I really appreciate it and what you're doing.
Thanks, Luke.
Keep it up.
Thanks, Luke.
Thank you for listening to the Lentil Intervention podcast. If you found this interesting, make sure you subscribe and share it with your friends.